The very day that this video airs, I will be going, along with my wife, to my 35th high school reunion. It won't be at the high school, but just so you know what high school we're talking about, Catholic Memorial High School in Waukesha. And I haven't gone to any of the reunions prior to this, so it'll be kind of interesting to see what happens. And it reminded me of something that I think I found humorous and also surprising at the time, and I think you might also find both humorous and surprising, given what you know about me as this 52-year-old guy who shoots videos and talks about philosophy and all of that. So graduation, right? Back in, I think it must have been June of 1988. I think we got out in June. Big production, right? By that time, I was actually so ready to be done with high school, and I was already, working what was going to be not just a summer job, but a job for a while. And my plans were not to go on to college, but rather to go into the Army. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in just a minute. So, I didn't have the kind of stress that a lot of my fellow students were carrying with them of, I'm going to go off to college and, it's, more education. Or I was pretty much done, other than the training that I would get in the Army down the line. And something really funny happened during the graduation ceremony. So if you're not familiar with American graduation ceremonies, because I do have a sort of an international viewership, they're all kind of the same. There's people who give like a speech. It's very aspirational. They're, sometimes a local notable or somebody who went to the school. And you're wearing these caps and gowns. They're usually the school colors. So at Catholic Memorial, we're all wearing, kind of a bluish gown, and then you've got the mortar caps on top. And sometimes people embellish them these days with like, a stole or a pin or something like that. Back then, we didn't do that. Everybody basically wore the same thing. Sometimes people will wear a dress or a suit or something kind of fancy or formal underneath it. There's a little bit of a funny thing before that. We had to do this practice before it, and I actually just wore a Speedo underneath mine because I knew that the whole thing was zipped up and nobody could tell anything, and I knew it was going to be hot as hell the day that we actually had to do the rehearsal before we did the actual thing at night in the auditorium. So anyway, I'm Sadler, so my name comes kind of late in the game. You start out with the A's, and then you do the B's and the C's. And everybody walks across the stage, and there's the principal and certain other teachers, and they shake your hand, and they give you this thing that's got your diploma inside, hopefully, right? You don't actually know until you open it up. And then you get off the stage, and, your family, cheers and stuff like that. And then they had awards, and I don't remember what any of the other awards were. I should mention, too, that usually there's a valedictorian. This is the person who's got the best grades, and they get to give a speech as well, blah, 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 what would they possibly know at that age that could be, interesting or helpful? And I don't even remember who our valedictorian was, quite frankly, because I was just kind of like through it, My friends were graduating with me. We were going to go to parties after that, and, I know my mom and sister were there, and maybe some of my other family members. So anyway, you do the graduation thing, walk across the stage, shake the hands with everybody. I think people took some pictures or something like that. And then you go back to your seats. And they have this award and that award, and this person's going up to get that award. And then I hear my name called. And they said, we have an award for Gregory Sadler. And I was thinking, what could that possibly be? I mean, I've kind of been screwing around, the last couple years here, I'll tell you more about this, why it was so surprising for me. Let me just jump to what the award was. So I get up there on the stage and they say, for succeeding despite the odds. And they hand me a sort of a wooden thing that you can put on the wall, a plaque, right? And I'm looked down and it says that, for succeeding despite the odds. I'm not sure what happened to that. I lost it somewhere along the line. And it comes with an envelope as well, because it's a scholarship, right? A scholarship check from some local law firm. And it was for somebody who was, suffered some adversity or was kind of a screw up, not living up to their potential, or maybe they were living up to their potential and they succeeded, whatever success was. And I guess success was I actually graduated. So, I get this and I'm like, it's kind of a backhanded compliment, isn't it? Nobody else is getting this. They all succeeded, but I succeeded despite the odds. And I don't know who voted on it, right? It must have been some of our teachers or, the principal or somebody like that. So I take it and I go back to my seat. And then later on, after we're all sort of like released, and I go and, I'm with my mom and my sister, and I don't remember who else. Maybe one of her boyfriends, maybe it was Fran at that time. They're like, what was that about? And I'm like, I don't know, And so we look at it, and there's a check for $700 in that. And that was a lot of money back then. If you think about the costs of things now, $700 wouldn't be that much at this point in time. But just to give you like an idea, so I began paying rent that summer because the Social Security, survivors benefits for, my dad had died when I was 11. My mom got survivor benefits for both me and my sister while we were still in school. So even though I wasn't 18, as soon as high school ends, they're cut off, right? So my mom was like, hey, I need you to pay some rent. I think $300 would be fair. And that was actually way more than fair considering how much I ate back then. And so, that gives you an idea. Can you rent some place for $300 now? No. But, this would have been like 2 months worth of living expenses for me. So, the intention of the award was that it would be used, for school expenses. I would be going off to college, and maybe I'd buy books with it, or it would be like furnishings for the room or something like that, right? But I didn't spend it on that. What did I spend it on? Well, I just happened to be enrolled in a karate dojo in downtown Waukesha, and I wanted to learn karate well. It was with Neil Stolzmark was the sensei back then. He might still be, for all I know. And it was Shorin-ryu karate, right? And so given that I had that money, I was like, well, I was going to be paying for karate classes and, buying the equipment and stuff that I needed with the job that I have at Kentucky Fried Chicken. And there's a whole other story I could tell about that. I think I may have talked about that in a video before under crappy jobs that I've had. But now I've got enough money to buy 6 months of tuition right off the bat, And so I went in and, first I had to open up a bank account. So I go to the local bank. I actually could just walk there and, put the check in there, had a checking account. The next day, went down to the karate studio, met with Sensei, and wrote him a check. And now there was still some money left in there. I guess what I'd been doing previously was just going to my family's bank, and when I'd get a paycheck from work, I'd just cash the whole damn thing and turn it into bills and coins, right? I didn't have a checking account until that point in time. So my mom was not thrilled with this. And she insisted that I write a letter to the law firm, sort of, thanking them, which a good thing, and then slash apologizing, explaining why the money was not going to go to any sort of institute of higher education, but rather to studying karate, which I was doing, by the way. I was working at night. I ended up quitting Kentucky Fried and starting to work at a Ponderosa Steakhouse, the evening shift, and I could work out in the day. And so I was in that dojo most days anywhere from like 2 to 4 hours a day. I actually progressed very, very quickly. So we're talking about a time from June of 1998 to February of 1999 when I actually entered the Army and then went off to basic training. So that's what I spent the money on. And I wrote this letter. I never actually heard back from the law firm. And I'm kind of happy I didn't because, I didn't imagine that they would be particularly thrilled about me doing this, particularly since, it was sort of like a typical Greg, the burnout metal guy kind of thing to do, So why did I get an award for succeeding despite the odds? Well, I was kind of a screw up in high school. I was very smart. I tested well, and I came in, and I came in 1984, and that summer I had begun lifting weights. I was listening to some heavy metal bands before that, but I discovered Iron Maiden and Rat and Motley Crue and Twisted Sister and eventually by the end of the summer Judas Priest and Black Sabbath and all these bands, and I was like getting into it, and I knew other people who were into it through my mom was in Parents Without Partners, and this was like a club for people who were either widowed or divorced, single parents who wanted to meet other single parents, date them. Sometimes it was just hookups. And we'd often go on like camping trips and, canoeing and all sorts of things. And so it was a way for like the parents to get to hang out with other people who were going through the same thing as them. And we kids, we would have a great time. At least those of us who were socially inclined and those in that group who were into heavy metal, because there was this guy, Jerry, who was like a year older than me. And, he knew all sorts of bands. And then there were the Ron girls, one of whom was younger than me, one who was the same age as me, and Jerry knew them. And there were a couple other people that we all kind of hung out in it. And there were other kids in the neighborhood who were getting into metal as well. So, we'd like skateboard around and listen to AC/DC or Kiss or Metallica later on. And just, get into trouble. And meanwhile, I'm entering high school. So I get to high school and I'm already growing my hair, for me at that time, kind of long. It's not really like the length that it is now, but it was longish in the 80s, enough to draw attention. And I'm wearing stuff that's pretty tame now, but, considered kind of like burnout garb back then. And then I get in with a bunch of other kids who are into this sort of stuff, including the older kids who I meet in part because I want to fence. I want to, learn to fight with swords. I'd always wanted to be a sword fighter since I saw like the Three Musketeers when I was a kid. And so this is an opportunity to do that. Turns out they were the burnouts, the kids who wear the leather jackets, listen to heavy metal, do crimes, some of them were super into drugs and drinking and stuff like that. And so anyway, I ran with kind of a rough, older crowd and, got into trouble here and there. I carried around a butterfly knife, and we would get in fights with the jocks, and they'd beat us up, and we'd beat them up, and we'd have somebody would have a boom box in school, and we'd be playing Ozzy Osbourne or Dio or stuff like that in the halls during the breaks. So it was like a whole thing, right? It was I won't go so far as to call it a lifestyle, but it was definitely kind of a commitment. And along with that went, not really taking academics that seriously. And I wasn't inclined to take academics seriously when I was in high school. I wanted to have fun and figure out who I was and, listen to this cool music and do things, right? I will say that I did do very well in gym class. I really liked gym. That has to do in part with who the coach was, who I've talked about elsewhere, Chuck Bova. I did fencing, I ran track, so I wasn't like a total burnout. But, I also I screwed up a good bit and didn't take my other classes seriously. In the literature and English classes, I'd read whatever I wanted to read, and then just, I didn't pay much attention to what the assignments were. I did really like history, but I didn't always like my history teachers. Math, I took the minimal amount that I needed to finish up, as far as the state was concerned. So I got to Algebra 2 and Trig and just quit doing math. Funny, because I became a math major in college later on. And, I actually took a lot of art classes, believe it or not. I took painting and jewelry and ceramics. And it was in part because that's what the burnouts were doing. They would take art classes, some of them. And anyway, long story short, I was a screw up. I would sleep in class. My last 2 years, I was really, screwing around a lot as I became what they call an upperclassman. And, I also got into a lot of trouble. There was a summer where I got arrested. I'd been getting in fights and stuff like that. And I wound up in a juvenile detention center for quite a while. They did some psych tests on me. And I wound up in a psychiatric hospital for a while. As I got in there, the people that were in there, that was really a harrowing experience, because they were like, yeah, these tests, these people did them wrong, the county people. You don't have the problems that they say that you do, but we're going to keep you in here anyway. And I saw some people who were really, really, really messed up, and that was very perspective providing for me. I was like, ooh, I better get my crap together. Not academically, but, in terms of figuring out my life problems. And, I did have some issues. I was getting in fights a lot because I think, my dad, having died, I never really had processed that. I'd been told, at the funeral, I had these people coming up to me who were his friends saying, you're the man of the house now. I was 11, right, at the time. So that's a terrible thing to tell people when they're that age. It's not helpful at all. And one thing you don't learn when you don't have a good male role model around is when guys mess with each other. So should you pop somebody in the face, or should you fight with them, or threaten them, or should you take things as a joke, right? And it's easier to learn that stuff when you have somebody. I mean, if my dad had lived, he would have been very helpful with all that sort of stuff. So I didn't know how to manage all of these things: belonging, aggression, fear, wanting to figure out how dating worked and all that kind of stuff. And it took a toll on me. But I also got to see kids who were really in terrible situations. The stuff that happened to me wasn't that bad, but it kind of did some damage. There were other kids who had it way, way worse. And so anyway, I get out, I get back to school, senior year is going on. And, they actually had a support group for kids who'd had losses. And it was kind of interesting too. We had a senior retreat, and I got put on the committee somehow. One of the teachers, wanted me to do that. It was a chance for me to interact with the kids who weren't in my group And the senior retreat was, pretty interesting experience. You got to find out like what other kids who you thought had it all together were actually going through, and a lot of them had some serious issues as well. And because I had worked through my stuff, I could be kind of a leader and be a compassionate ear, weirdly enough, right? For helping out these other people. So who knows? I don't know who put me up for the award, but they felt that I had succeeded. And, making it through high school, I suppose, was a sort of success. I immediately, went into this thing of just working and studying karate and getting drunk with my friends on the weekends and doing a lot of we weren't supposed to be doing, full contact stuff, but we would do it anyway. Our sensei, if he found out, he would have kicked us out of the dojo. We'd beat the crap out of each other and all that. And then I went in the Army and the idea was that I was either going to be a lifer, or a friend of mine, his uncle had actually been a mercenary and he had contacts, and it was the late 80s. So that's what I had planned to do. Very unrealistic sort of life ideas, but that's where I was at the time. So anyway, fast forward now 35 years, I haven't seen any of these people, with a few exceptions, since then. And it will be very interesting to see what they look like, many of them I know the names, but I can't place them with faces, and some of them I don't even recognize the names. So it'll be interesting to see what all of us have turned into so far down the line, lifetimes ago. 35 years. So I was 17 when I graduated from high school. More than double that amount of time has passed now, right? So anyway, that's we'll see what happens with that. If interesting things happen at the reunion, maybe I'll do another video. But I just wanted to bring up that funny award, succeeding despite the odds, that I got at my high school graduation.